and the lepers. Just go with me. This is the court of the men who are priests. Here is the area where the men who are not priests are allowed to go. This area here is the altar. Yeah, tiny lettering. I know you can't read it, but you'll remember the scribbles. And this here is the actual temple building. So what's this big area out here? This is the area of the Gentiles. How many Jews do we have in this room today? That's as far as you can go. The big courtyard outside. And this dotted line right here is a 4.5 foot tall fence keeping you out. Keeping me out too. I don't have any Jewish blood in my body that I know of. We read this story, and if you can picture this, Jesus walks into the temple area. And the temple area is this area out here where the Gentiles' court is. When God originally created the idea for the temple, He designed it in such a way that you would have this incredible sense of God's holiness and His distance from people. I mean, it was like He was separated from them by a gigantic orchestra pit, so that you could come to the courtyard and you could come into the fence if you were a Jew. And if you were a woman or a leper or, someone else with some type of infirmity, please, this is not a judgment about women. It was just sort of part of the culture of the day and everything and stuff like that. We can talk about that some other time. But that's where the court of the women was created. And then inside that area is where the men could go. And if you were a priest, you could go farther into there and you could sacrifice things on that altar. So if you brought your sacrifice to Jerusalem, you had to send it all the way in here to someone else. And if you were a guy, you could stand outside and watch it, but that was it. And then if you were the high priest, you could, I guess one of the high priests, you could enter into the temple, but only the high priest, the high priest, once a year could enter this area right in the back, called the Holy of Holies. Wall, all the way outside. Here's the deal. Jesus goes into this temple area, starts overthrowing the money changers and stuff like that, and He says something. Did you pick up on what He said? He said, "My house will be called a house of prayer." I want to draw your attention to where He gets that verse, because He's quoting the Old Testament. He's quoting Isaiah 56. So if you go there with me, let's flip back there for a little bit. The page number for Isaiah 56 is 516, if you're using our Bibles there. But go ahead and flip there, and I want to show you something, verses 1 through 8. God is speaking to Isaiah. He says, and Isaiah is quoting him, this is what the Lord says: "Maintain justice and do what is right, for my salvation is close at hand, and my righteousness will soon be revealed. Blessed is the man who does this, the man who holds it fast, who keeps the Sabbath without desecrating it, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Let no foreigner who has bound himself to the Lord say, 'The Lord will surely exclude me from His people.' Let not any eunuch complain, 'I'm only a dry tree,' for this is what the Lord says to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbath, who choose what pleases me, and hold fast to my covenant. To them I will give within my temple and its walls a memorial and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will not be cut off. And foreigners who bind themselves to the Lord to serve Him, to love the name of the Lord, and to worship Him, all who keep the Sabbath without desecrating it, and who hold fast to my covenant, these I will bring to my holy mountain and give them joy in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. The sovereign Lord declares, He who gathers the exiles of Israel, I will gather still others to them besides those already gathered. When God originally created the temple, he created it with all these limits, all these layers, all these things that you had to work past, you had to get past in order to access God. But he said there is coming a day when even a foreigner, not just any foreigner, but a disgraced foreigner, a person who's been taken into slavery, made into a eunuch, and then, that person, that foreigner who's disgraced among all other people in the entire world, that person will have a place in my house better than sons and daughters. You see, what God is saying in that ancient Old Testament passage is what Jesus is trying to draw their attention to today. That what they have done is they have set up shop in the very place where the Gentiles could go. And according to their ancient laws, at that point in time, when Jesus was around, if any Gentile crossed the fence, if he went through the little holes in the fence or climbed over it or anything like that, he could be killed immediately. And the Roman government said, we'll let it happen. We'll let it happen. Any Gentile who goes past that little fence could be killed immediately. That was just the way it worked. So the only place, legally speaking, the Gentiles could be for them to access the presence of God was in that court, and that's where the mall is. Jesus comes in and he says, this is wrong. My house will be called a house of prayer for all the nations. It's God's desire to bring the foreigners in. Here's the lesson for us. The lesson for us is simply this. Oh, I missed that whole promise thing. You can write those blanks down. I forgot to say it. But, or maybe I missed a blank. Did I miss a blank? No, I didn't. Hey, where's it going? Anyway, okay, we'll get to it. Here's the blanks that you should write down here. The promise of the Messiah. Okay, I'll explain this a little bit. See, the problem with the people is that they had forgotten this passage in Isaiah. They had forgotten this passage in Isaiah that talks about God's welcoming thing. They thought the Messiah was going to be their king. But here's the deal. The promise of the Messiah was not a promise about defeating their enemies and rebuilding Israel. It was instead a promise that was all about defeating sin and redefining who God's people were. This is the place I wanted to get you to, is that there's a place for everyone. There you go. There's a place for everyone. Jesus is in the temple, he's in the court of the Gentiles, and they've been working hard to create a system for the Jewish people that excludes the Gentile people, and Jesus says that's not right. That's not right. Here in my house, there's a place for everyone. So when you come to Palm Sunday, the first thing you got to realize